Greetings from Costa Rica once again. My name is Matt Rosensteele. Welcome to Costa Rica FAQ, where I talk about the frequently asked questions about moving to, retiring in, investing in Costa Rica, etc. Thank you very much for joining me today. If you're watching on YouTube, I'd love a subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, please give us a like. Again, my name is Matt Rosensteele. I work with Coldwell Banker, Tamarindo Realty. Please feel free to send me an email to matt@cbtamarindo.com with any questions, comments, or concerns. You can post those in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. Feel free to reach out and get in touch with me in any way. I'm more than happy to help. Today on Costa Rica FAQ number 20, we're sticking to our New Year's resolution of dividing up these big questions into tiny, edible, delectable portion sizes. This is FAQ 20, Chapter 3. We're covering corporate taxes here in Costa Rica. And there's really three questions that we're going to look at regarding taxes. First of all, I want to cover inactive versus active corporations here in Costa Rica, how you get registered, the logistics behind it, and give an overview of that. Next, we'll move on to the annual flat tax, which we touched on in Chapter 2 of this series on corporations. And finally, we're going to talk about taxes that I think are the most relevant to people thinking of investing in a condo or a property here. Taxes on rental income is the last topic we'll look at. As always, reminding you before we get started, this is not legal advice, and you should confirm everything here in Costa Rica with your attorney, your tax lawyer, accountants, etc. Going forward, let's start with question number 1 for today. In Costa Rica, there are active and inactive corporations. The government has created a structure so that you can have a corporation that, as an inactive entity, really is just meant to hold on to property, and there's a designation for it that you can obtain with the tax ministry. This designation is something that your attorney can do at the time of closing. Remember in Chapter 1 we talked about when you should incorporate. Your lawyer, the public notary handling the sale or purchase of your property, can do that for you right at the time of closing, and they can set you up as either an inactive or active corporation. If you've bought a property, you own a corporation, you want to change your status, a lot of these functions can now actually be done online through the government tax ministry. I do think for a number of questions you still have to make a trip out to an actual tax office, but an important point that I want to touch on is that whether your corporation is active or inactive, you're going to need to file an annual tax return for it. If you're an inactive corporation, well, that tax return is just going to have straight zeros up and down the income and expense lines on your tax form. But it's important that you know that you need to do it so that your corporation remains in good standing. Second of all, if you decide to be an active corporation to have economic activity, let's say rental income, you have to register the economic activity through the tax ministry. And again, this is something that I think you can do online now with your corporation. Once you have an account set up to log in and modify, update your corporation, you could add an economic activity, so you actually register for what kinds of things you're going to be doing. And creating that online login is definitely something that you're going to have to make a trip to a tax ministry for. Most often, both of these tasks, filing an annual tax return and registering your activity, are going to be handled by either your attorney or an accountant for you here in Costa Rica. So I say you can do it online, and in fact, a lot of property managers could help you do that sort of thing, but both of those are something that you need to just be aware and make sure they're happening so that you're in good standing with the tax ministry. Let's talk about the annual flat tax. And this is a source of ire for people here in Costa Rica simply because Virtually everyone investing in Costa Rica for a long time did so through a corporation. And for a long time that provided huge tax benefits that I've already addressed. Well, those tax benefits, those, yes, are gone. At the time of purchasing your property, you can't save any money. And in fact, the government passed an annual flat tax on all legal entities here in Costa Rica, rather on all corporations, that you have to pay, whether you have an active corporation that's generating rental income and making huge numbers for you, or whether you have an inactive corporation simply holding your property. That flat tax, it's very important you have paid, simply because the government here, having really integrated their tax system with a lot of different other administrative functions, the government will not allow you to do certain things with your corporation unless that tax is paid. For example, if I want to find a list of the legal representatives of your corporation in the National Registry, I can't do that until your corporate annual flat tax is paid and up to date. How much is it? Well, if you're an inactive corporation as of 2020, the total was 67,000 colones, which sounds like a big number, but it's actually $118 more or less. Excuse me. Just had a water break. So if you have an active corporation running rental income, generating any kind of economic activity, anywhere up to $90,000, you're going to be paying 112,000 colones, or about $196, 200 bucks, let's call it. Those are the taxes as of 2020. The government actually sets them based on a monthly salary number that they pick up and percentages of that. But anyway, for our purposes, think of it this way. You're going to be paying about 120 bucks if you have an inactive corporation, and most likely about $200 for an active corporation. Moving on to rental income and how that's taxed. This is another thing that has changed dramatically since Costa Rica's fiscal reform in July of 2019. That law affected everything from sales taxes to rentals to service taxes, on and on and on. Definitely another question I addressed in my capital gains tax video. Anyhow, to quickly give you the number, here in Costa Rica now, all rental income is taxed at a 15% rate on the gross income. Now let's get that straight. This is income that is coming directly from your gross number. You can only deduct 15% of your gross rental income as, let's call it, the standard automatic deduction, and that will happen essentially when the government is calculating your tax obligation. If you put in your gross income number, they will automatically assume a 15% reduction for expenses. Well, you might say, well, my expenses are far above that 15%. Yes, a lot of people operate with much higher than 15% expenses for their rental income, but that's the automatic standard deduction that the government put in place, and the only way to try and deduct more than that 15% involves having employees registered with the National Social Security Administration. Basically, you have to show that you have a real payroll and that you're paying your Social Security bills for your employees to deduct anything more than that standard 15%. So to be short, the income tax on your Costa Rica rental income is going to be 15% on 85% of your gross rental income, unless you have a real payroll that you're willing to prove in order to deduct more than that 15%. Yes, it's a bit confusing. Yes, the government is passing taxes in order to improve their financial situation. And yes, they're very much trying to tap into sources of revenue that until now have been basically evaded by many, many people investing in and renting their properties here in Costa Rica. Along with that tax reform came an integration of the tax ministry. Like I said, with a lot of different governmental agencies, and very much Costa Rica is trying to make sure that if you're earning rentals, that you're charging and paying those taxes and contributing to society here. So as a summary today, this was my third chapter of FAQ 20 on corporations. Feel free to let me know if you have any more questions about corporations here in Costa Rica. In this chapter, I went briefly over active versus inactive corporations, how you get set up for that. I touched on the flat tax that you have to pay annually, whether or not you're an inactive or active corporation. And finally, I discussed income tax and specifically that related to rental income. Obviously, corporations have a ton of different potential income in Costa Rica, but I think rental income is the most relevant. And again, that's taxed at a 15% rate on 85% of the gross income. Next on Costa Rica FAQ, I'll be talking about property management, some really simple ideas there. Thank you very much for joining me today. Again, my name is Matt Rosensteele. I work with Coldwell Banker Tamarindo Realty, lived and worked here in Costa Rica since 2008. Feel free to send me any question to matt@cbtamarindo.com. Thanks again for joining. I appreciate it. Have a great day, and pura vida.